From Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to this special edition, an extended edition of Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew. It's election night in America on Bloomberg TV and radio, 9 months after the start of President Trump's second term. Voters tonight in key states set to deliver an early referendum, a snapshot on the mood of the nation, party enthusiasm, and who has momentum heading into next year's midterms. In New York City, the spotlight is on rising Democratic socialists pledging to take on affordability in America's largest city. Will Zohran Mamdani shake up the city hall and with it the future of the Democratic Party, even as President Trump throws his weight in at the 11th hour? Across the river in New Jersey now, margins and the money pouring in. It's the most expensive gubernatorial race in New Jersey history. Democrat Mikey Sherrill taking on Republican Jack Ciattarelli in a state where President Trump made surprising gains 1 year ago. Will that trend and Trump's endorsement help deliver a GOP upset? In Virginia, meantime, history being made. The Commonwealth poised to elect its first female governor tonight. The impact of the government shutdown looming large over a state that's home to a sizable federal workforce, now feeling the pain of missed paychecks and DOGE layoffs. And out west, drawing new lines, California Governor Gavin Newsom's high-stakes redistricting vote tonight could help to reshape the political map for midterms and play a big role in the balance of power in the U.S. House. Bloomberg is covering it all with our team of reporters and analysts from coast to coast. With Myles in New York, Romaine Bostick in New Jersey, Skylar Woodhouse in Virginia, and more we'll get to later in the program. But we do begin in New York City, where Bloomberg's Myles Miller joins us now with the latest on the mayor's race. Myles, what do you have?
Yeah, we're talking about 1.4 million people who've already cast their ballots today in this race. It is a closely watched election, and we saw all three candidates go out today. We saw two of the candidates, Zohran Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo, both cast their votes on Election Day, and then Curtis Sliwa, who had previously cast his ballot, went out and met with poll workers. This is a highly watched election. Right now, we know that the latest polling shows that there is basically 10 points between Cuomo and Mamdani, and then 11 points trailing is Curtis Sliwa. We spoke with Zohran Mamdani earlier this morning, and we wanted to know basically what he would think would be a mandate in this race. Would it be getting to 50%? Would it be 47%? And he said any victory would be a mandate. And that's talking about a mandate for his progressive proposals. Free buses, universal child care here in this city, taxes on millionaires and above in order to pay for that, in addition to starting some other key proposals to make the rents cheaper by freezing the rents. But how does that get paid for? That is all what they're focused on today, and Andrew Cuomo trying to get a comeback after stepping down as governor in 2021.
All right, Myles, thank you so much. We now turn to the New Jersey governor's race, where Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick is live on the ground in Jersey City, having spent the day talking to voters. Romaine, how's it shaping up tonight?
Well, it's shaping up to be a very close race, much closer than what we would have thought just a couple of months ago when Mikey Sherrill was actually leading her Republican challenger, Jack Ciattarelli, by double-digit percentage points. As we stand right now, the polling shows that the distance between those two is 1 to 2 to maybe 3 percentage points at best within the margin of error. And voter turnout is going to be key here. We're already learning that we are tracking above voter turnout for 2021. But there is one interesting wrinkle in this, Joe. The number of registered Republican voters has actually gone up since the last election cycle. And by the last election cycle, I mean last year, while the number of registered Democratic voters has actually gone down. And that's key because, of course, the Democrats have had a relatively narrow majority with regards to registered voters. About 38% of the electorate here in the state of New Jersey are Democrats. About 25 to 26% are Republicans as of the election cycle in 2024. The remainder of those, roughly about 35%, are independents. So this is not just a fight for the heart and soul of either the left or the right. It's really a fight right now for voter turnout and the ability for Jack Ciattarelli and Mikey Sherrill to actually sway some of those independent voters to their side.
Some hugely important factors in this race that we're watching this evening. Romaine, thank you. Remembering that is a race that many see as too close to call. It's a different story in Virginia, where it could be an easier effort for the Democrat Abigail Spanberger. We want to dig into this right now with Bloomberg's Skylar Woodhouse on the ground in Leesburg, Virginia. Skylar, how's the evening shaping up there?
Hi, Joe. We're here at the Winsome Earle-Sears campaign event. Right now, it's just mostly press hanging out in here. The doors opened about an hour and a half ago. Soon, though, the polls in Virginia closed at 7 o'clock, and we'll start to get an idea of how things are shaping out. I will just like to note that President Donald Trump just last night in a tele-rally was really encouraging Republican voters in Virginia to vote up and down the Republican ballot. He did not endorse Winsome Earle-Sears by name, but he did, try and enforce that support for the Republican candidates. And on the Democrat side, Abigail Spanberger has been out today talking with voters, trying to secure those last-minute votes. And I just would like to note that Spanberger has been the front runner in this race pretty much since the campaign cycle kicked off and has been leading in the polls nonstop. But there are still questions on how much ground the Sears campaign has picked up. And right now what we're seeing is this is the first time for Virginia voters to vote in a general election since President Donald Trump was elected back to office. And I'd just like to take a step back and talk about Virginia's proximity to Washington. The president came into office with sweeping layoffs to reduce the size of the federal government. And so this election is going to be the first moment where Virginia voters are going to be able to express their voice to get a sense of how much are they responding to President Donald Trump's policies. Are they in favor for his policies or are they against his policies? And what we have seen from the two candidates, from Winsome Earle-Sears, she has been leaning into President Donald Trump's common sense policies. And for Spanberger, she's been all eyes on the economy.
Bloomberg Skylar, Woodhouse, Romaine, Bostick, and Myles Miller, thank you to you all. We'll be checking back in with our great reporters in the field throughout the evening here. And joining me now live at World Headquarters in New York is Republican Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis of New York. It's great to see you on Election Day. Thanks for coming in.
Good to be with you.
Are we going to have a Democratic socialist as the next mayor of New York City?
I hope not. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you're going to see more people reject Zohran Mamdani at the ballot box today. The problem is that vote is a little bit still split. I think Andrew Cuomo has done a good job at the 11th hour rallying support from all over the city of New York, even going so far as getting Donald Trump to weigh in last night. And I think that has energized a base to come out today, which is why we're seeing a tremendous turnout. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to stop this guy at the ballot box and people will continue to come out in droves, and we will save this city from socialism, which can never, it'll be very difficult in a city like this where we have capitalism, the free market, really the economic engine for the country to be run by a socialist. I think if Zohran Mamdani wins, it puts a lot more pressure on me as the only Republican representing our city in Washington to work with President Trump to try to stop some of the destruction. And we'll take it day by day, but let's be hopeful for the rest of the night still.
Yeah, it says a lot about New York politics when Donald Trump is endorsing the former Democratic governor of New York. Are you urging your Republican friends to vote Cuomo?
Well, look, I endorsed Curtis Sliwa early on, but what I will say is that I think people across the city are seeing that it's irrational right now, that we will take anybody but this communist socialist candidate who wants to implement the policies of Karl Marx's playbook, literally seizing the means of production, abolishing private property ownership, taking over supermarkets and having them be government run. These are not policies that New Yorkers want to see. Now, I've, over the decades, been, especially as a state assembly member, very critical of Andrew Cuomo. I mean, this is the person who brought us bail reform. He brought us sanctuary state policy, gave free college tuition to illegal immigrants. He brought us congestion pricing, all things that I've been critical of. With that said, if Curtis is not going to win, I'd be happy with Andrew Cuomo, certainly before Zohran Mamdani. And I'm hopeful that today New Yorkers looked at the polls and saw what was happening here and then went out and voted accordingly.
Well, of course, we've got a gubernatorial contest in New Jersey that has some overlap here. A lot of people live in New Jersey and come into New York City to work. And when you hear the president say that he'll cancel federal funding for New York City if there's a Mayor Mamdani, how do Republicans who live and work here manage that?
And like I say, that...
Do you take him at his word?
Well, look, it presents a problem for me, as
Sure
I said, the only Republican representing our city in Washington.
How are you supposed to bring home the bacon?
Well, and you know what, we just had this battle because the Department of Homeland Security tried to strip counterterrorism money from the NYPD because they redid the formulas to basically hurt sanctuary states. I did reach out to the president, and to his credit, within 48 hours, that money was restored, $187 million to our state, $100 million from the NYPD. So in many ways, I'll be sort of this intermediary. But I understand what the president's trying to say here. He's trying to say we're not going to put good federal tax dollars after communist socialist policies. So there needs to be a balanced approach here. We'll see what happens, but certainly I think my job will be made more difficult if Zohran Mamdani does win today.
We spoke earlier today with Terry McAuliffe, who was not only the governor of Virginia, but ran the DNC for some time. So you know that you're not going to agree probably with anything he says. I'm curious what you make of his framing, though, on the cost issue and the Trump impact. Donald Trump's not on the ballot, but could be inspiring some decisions that are made in all of the contests that we're talking about tonight. Here's Terry McAuliffe earlier on Bloomberg.
This is a perfect storm for Donald Trump this year in these elections. We're going to win big in Virginia. We're going to sweep the statewide. Trump has been a disaster for Virginia. This is a lot like 2017 when Trump won in 16. We won the governorship by 9.5 points. It's turbocharged this year because it comes down to affordability. People are paying more for groceries. They're paying more for energy. And now, because of the big ugly bill, they're paying more for health care. So it's going to be a big night, not only here, also in New Jersey, also in California, also in New York.
You would disagree with just about everything you just said, but I want to seize on the issue of costs.
Yeah.
Because isn't it ironic that the same issue that drove Donald Trump back into the White House appears to be electing Zoran Mamdani in New York?
Well, I think energy prices are coming down, so that's number one. Number two, the health care has nothing to do with the big, beautiful bill. As a matter of fact, it was the failure of the Affordable Care Act that was never really affordable that the cost has skyrocketed, and that's the reason why the Democrats failed with the Affordable Care Act, so let's be clear about that. With that said, I do think this is somewhat of a referendum, and I think it's interesting that the two Democrat women that are running for governor in New Jersey and in Virginia both voted to shut down the government. And that should, I mean, Virginia people who work for the government should be pissed off about that, but like was mentioned earlier, they might be upset by some of the DOJ cuts as well. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in Virginia. I think we have a better shot Republicans in New Jersey. I do hope that Jack Ciattarelli pulls it off.
You mentioned shutdown. We're at day 35 here, for crying out loud, Congresswoman. We've been talking about this a lot, but there seems to be a feeling, at least in the Senate, that this will end after these elections. Do you believe that?
Well, I think that just shows how political. This was always politically
Is this an inflection
motivating
point
for the Democrats.
today?
I think the Democrats are now seeing that it was not smart to shut down the government. This was the same bill they voted for 4 times before, and yet these 7 Democrats, led by Chuck Schumer, would not vote for that very same language, very same funding levels to keep our government open. And now, when you're seeing people suffering, 42 million Americans that are not receiving SNAP or minimal SNAP benefits, you're seeing all the airlines being impacted throughout the country. The unions, the largest union, American Federation of Government Employees, as well as others that represent air traffic controllers, are saying just vote for the same bill you previously supported 4 times that we passed in the House back in September. I think the pressure is on for the Democrats to end the shenanigans, reopen our government, and it could happen as early as this week.
It could. Well, if that's the case, you've been out of session for, 45 days or something. A new CR is going to be needed with a different date at some point, so you change 1 point of punctuation. Everyone needs to come back. Are you ready to go to Washington?
I'm ready to go back. I've been there because we still have to meet with people. We have groups that are coming to see us. There are things still happening. And we're doing our work in the district as well, meeting with constituents, doing various visits to the food pantry, senior centers, see what's going on now, national parks, to make sure they're being clean and maintained. So we've been working. We just have not been voting in session. But the work of a congressperson never actually ends, does it?
Well, and conducting constituent services with the staff not getting paid is a real challenge as well.
That's right.
So we thank them for everything that they're doing. And it's great to see you on this election day, Congresswoman. Thank you for joining us. Nicole Malliotakis of New York, we thank you, as always, for the insights. Coming up, our election coverage continues. When we look at President Trump's influence over these key races, we'll discuss when we assemble our political panel next on this special extended edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
You have a communist running, and you shouldn't vote for him. He's a disaster.
You know, he's running against a communist. I would think that he would have a good shot of winning. He's a communist. I don't think our country is ready for a communist.
I'd prefer not to have a communist mayor of New York City. And, you know, that's what he is based on his policy. Democrats have become radical left lunatics. They have policies that nobody's going to buy. And, you know, I see what's going on in New York. We're going to have perhaps a communist mayor. It's not even believable, my beautiful New York.
This is a special extended edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew. That, of course, President Trump reaffirming his criticism repeatedly of the state of New York City mayoral election. The city of New York, I should say. Today, the first major barometer that voters have to judge President Trump's policies since he returned to the White House back in January. And the results could offer an early indicator of the battle for congressional control in next year's midterms. For details of the president's influence on today's elections, we turn to Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall. She's at the White House reporting from the North Lawn. Tyler?
Hey, Joe. Good evening. Well, you're exactly right. Today marks the unofficial kickoff for the 2026 campaign season, which is why these races are in part seen as a reflection on President Trump's policies so far this term. And the economy, really the issue that propelled President Trump to the White House, is again top of mind for voters tonight. Look at how the Democratic nominees for the gubernatorial races in New Jersey and Virginia are linking their Republican opponents to President Trump's economic agenda, as consumer sentiment in October hit a 5-month low. But important context here, President Trump made significant inroads in both of these seats in 2024. In both these states in 2024. He did lose Virginia and New Jersey, but he closed the gap by 5 and 10 percentage points respectively compared to the numbers he brought in 2020, which has opened the door for new Republican voters in both of these places. Though a strategist tells me without President Trump's name actually on the ballot, that could make it harder to essentially motivate these same voters again, which is why this emphasis on his policies from both sides of the aisle is so essential for these races. Now, no matter what happens tonight, both sides of the aisle are going to be combing through the results to impact their midterm strategy. And Joe, as you well know, that's perhaps most pertinent when it comes to the New York City mayoral election, which President Trump has directly inserted himself into. He has now threatened to withhold federal funding if Mamdani wins the election. According to the city, they are banking on $7.4 billion in federal grants for their fiscal year 2026 budget.
Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall at the White House. Thank you, Tyler. We'll check back in with you throughout the evening as we learn more about the outcome of these races. And joining us now here at Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York, our political panel, Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis, Republican strategist and partner at Stone Court Capital, alongside Democratic analyst Jeannie Sheehan Zaino, democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Here we go again. Happy Election Day to both of you. It is great to see you. Jeannie, let's start with you as our New Yorker. Donald Trump is not on the ballot. To what extent are Democrats reacting to his policies, and what does it mean for Zohran Mamdani?
You know, I think they are reacting to Donald Trump to an extent. This is going to be a referendum on what he has done for the last 10 months. But you notice a big difference, and Tyler just alluded to this, in the advertisements in New York City, Virginia, New Jersey. They have not been so much as they were in previous elections about Donald Trump's personality, his behavior, threats to democracy. They are almost all focused on affordability and the cost of living. Yeah. And this is something that, love him or hate him, Mamdani has made his name on, talking about the fact that this city in particular, where he lives and where so many millions of people are voting today, is not affordable. People can't afford to buy groceries. They can't afford to get rent. So it is all about the cost of living. And when asked about this on 60 Minutes, what did Donald Trump say? The economy is much better. The stock market is booming. 401ks. And when Norah O'Donnell said, hey, wait a minute, not everybody's invested. Not everybody has a 401k. He said, oh, this is Joe Biden's problem, and started talking about cashless bail. He has no answer to this economic problem, and his poll numbers on the economy show it.
Well, when it comes to prices and inflation, then, and Rick, with the extent to which we've seen the Mamdani campaign succeed and Democrats across the country tonight, is this a statement on Donald Trump's handling of the economy and inflation? This is what brought him to office.
You know, I don't think so. I think this is much more a statement on the Democratic Party. I mean, look, there's no such thing as MAGA in the city of New York, right? I mean, like, Donald Trump can't say something and motivate thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of voters to do one thing or another. So, sure. I mean, in so much as he's an unpopular president amongst Democrats, which is, you know, the vast majority of the city of New York, that's one thing. But he ran against the Democratic Party. This is like a hostile takeover of the city of New York by a socialist candidate, right? The Democrats didn't even want to endorse this man. So, you know, his message, as Jeannie says, of, you know, economic empowerment and opportunity is as much against the Democrats as it is against the Republicans. And the votes he's getting are Democratic votes. They're not Republican votes. Curtis Sliwa isn't a MAGA guy. I mean, like, there aren't any MAGAs in New York. So I think in this case, Donald Trump's kind of the sideshow, and he's a great sideshow. He can command a lot of attention. But it doesn't have any real impact politically in the city of New York.
Well, he's commanded a response from Zohran Mamdani on the threat to pull federal funding if he's elected. Listen to what Mamdani said about this earlier today.
I look forward to utilizing every single tool at my disposal as the next mayor of this city to fight for the people of it. That means using the courts. That means using the bully pulpit. That means ensuring that we actually follow the letter of the law. And I know that doing so is something that threatens Donald Trump. It's why he's gone after Attorney General James, because she had the audacity to hold him to the same law that every New Yorker is held to. But I will not be intimidated by this president. I will not be intimidated by anyone, because my job here is to serve the people of the city.
Mamdani supporters love that answer, Jeannie. Chuck Schumer wouldn't even say today who he voted for. Mainstream Democrats are struggling with this.
They are struggling. Chuck Schumer, as you just mentioned, we don't know who he voted for. We know he did not endorse Mamdani.
Yeah.
Hakeem Jeffries waited until sort of the nth hour to make a lukewarm endorsement. Even Kathy Hochul, who really needs Mamdani if he wins, she stepped in late. Democrats are struggling with this. This is really the reality that in the primary, Mamdani came from out of nowhere, and the moderate establishment wing of the Democratic Party in New York had nobody that they could put up who would garner that kind of energy, enthusiasm in the primary. They end up with Andrew Cuomo, and given his recent history in New York, this is a hard sell. Can he still win? Absolutely, but I think if he does, it's going to be more of the fact that people are concerned about Mamdani rather than they're really excited to have Andrew Cuomo back in a position of executive authority in this state.
The president talks about his beloved New York, Rick, and you do a lot of work here. You know a lot of Democrats and Republicans here. You also know Republicans who live in New Jersey who might vote for Jack Ciattarelli tonight, who work in New York City. If the president starts defunding infrastructure and other programs here in New York City, is there not backlash for him?
Well, there's already been some of that activity.
There
with
has.
the tunnel project that
Absolutely.
the president killed, which affects both New York and New Jersey,
right.
as you point out. And I would not discount Donald Trump's threats. I mean, he has been very clear. When he says something like this, I'm going to defund these various programs, he usually does it.
You're right.
New York is a giver state. There are states that get more federal aid than they turn in tax revenue, but New York is one of the larger states that actually give more in revenue than they get back in federal support. And that could be the basis of a whole nother, legal and political battle where New York is paying the federal government for these things and they're not getting it back. And so I think there's a fairness issue that Donald Trump is probably going to have to look at if he wants to make good on these threats. But I think you see the future battleground. 2006 is happening today with those comments by the president and the response by our comrade Mamdani. You're going to have a major battle in this city coming forward.
How many people in New York actually think he's a communist, Jeannie? I'm serious.
In addition to Rick
Well,
Davis,
I think he knows better.
I think New Yorkers know Mamdani now. He has been campaigning. He has been an elected official here. He's been campaigning. I don't think they believe he's a communist. I think that the energy behind him is coming from a lot of particularly young people, but people across the city who are saying what has been going on in the Democratic Party and in New York City has not been working for us. And he has run this campaign on the economy, affordability, making this city livable. And that is attractive to these folks. I think there's a lot of questions on whether he can, in fact, do that once he gets into office.
Yeah.
But his energy, his enthusiasm, his youth, and the fact that he has been standing there and speaking truth to much of the establishment moderate wing of the party has been very attractive to these New Yorkers.
Really interesting. A great conversation with our panel that's going to be with us through the evening. Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, Bloomberg Politics contributors. Coming up tonight will be a big test of party enthusiasm heading into next year's midterms. As Rick was just mentioning, DNC Chair Ken Martin joins us next to discuss that and more on this special extended edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
The president has made his position on this very clear, both to the Chinese and also to all of you. He's answered this question directly. As for the most advanced chips, the Blackwell chip, that's not something we're interested in selling to China at this time.
This is a special extended edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew. That was White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt today discussing NVIDIA's Blackwell chips, which have become a major component of trade negotiations. You know that if you're with us typically on Bloomberg. Nvidia closed down almost 4% today, a risk-off session overall, with tech stocks and crypto bearing the brunt of the selling after Wall Street executives, several big names, warned investors to brace for a pullback at some point in the next 12 to 24 months. Joining us now for a look into how the markets are watching this news and today's election, Bloomberg's Norah Mulinda, who's live here at World Headquarters in New York for a special edition of Power Moves. Norah?
Well, certainly a wake-up call today that we saw in the stock market for Wall Street bulls. As you mentioned, we did see a pullback here across the board. Take a look at the S&P 500, down about 1.2% to end the day. NASDAQ lower by more than 2%. Dow Jones Industrial Average also falling, just clearly a sea of red if you look at indexes here. Of course, we know information technology really pulling a lot of these indexes here lower. But let's take a look at what the S&P 500 has been doing on the day. We did see down more than 1%, but also on a 5-day basis. It's also interesting to see how this index is moving as we think about the broader Wall Street right now dealing with this period of uncertainty. Of course, we know we have a government shutdown that's still prolonged, so you are seeing a lot of investors trying to find safe havens right now in this environment. But let's take a look also at what's going on in currencies, taking a look at Bitcoin here. Of course, this one in focus. We did see, of course, a summer rally, but you are beginning to see that fading a bit, with Bitcoin seeing a bit of a pullback here, now down below the key $100,000 level. So you are seeing this also as one of the areas that is being impacted by this risk-off sentiment. But digging into some of the specifics here, if you were to look at some of the individual movers in the market today, we were definitely keeping eyes on Nvidia, Palantir. Palantir really in focus, of course, on concerns that maybe valuations are too lofty here, concerns of a potential AI bubble, and you are really seeing that rippling into other sectors in the market. But you did see shares of Palantir ending down more than 7% to end the day. And of course, as I mentioned, Nvidia continues to be in focus. This has really been at the center a lot of the trade talk conversations here. But we did see shares of Nvidia also lower to end the day, especially as we really dissect a lot of the earnings that we did get from its peer, AMD. Of course, we know AMD has been a stock that people really are looking to potentially challenge the likes of Nvidia here. And we are seeing shares of AMD down in the post-market trade, down more than 2% here. And this is after its revenue failed to impress investors here. Of course, we know expectations still continue to be lofty here, and the Wall Street is just simply looking for more.
Could have some pressure on semis, I guess, again tomorrow. Bloomberg's Norah Mulinda, we thank you so much for the insights. We'll check back with you a bit later on tonight. As we continue our election coverage here on Bloomberg, I spoke earlier with Ken Martin, a key voice in these contests, as he's chair of the Democratic National Committee. We talked about the implications of tonight's elections and the future of the Democratic Party. Here's our conversation.
They're all important, for sure, and we'll be judged on all four of them, to be honest with you. I mean, what happens in California, what happens in Pennsylvania, of course, with those 3 Supreme Court races, and, of course, those 2 big statewide races in Virginia and New Jersey, the governor's races there. And, look, I'm very confident right now, but we're not complacent, meaning we still have a few hours left until the polls close, but we expect a big night tonight for Democrats. And, of course, the message it will send across the country is that, you know, those early reports of the demise of the Democratic Party and the death of the Democratic Party were deeply exaggerated. The Democratic Party is back, and we have a message for Donald Trump. We're coming for you in the 2026 midterms.
It's been interesting looking at the support that some of these candidates and campaigns have received. The DNC has put a lot of money to back the gubernatorial races that I mentioned. And to be clear, you were out front very early in endorsing Zoran Mamdani here in New York. But there's been a reluctance that we've seen among many mainstream Democrats to warm up to this candidate. Chuck Schumer, just a short time ago, wouldn't even say who he voted for. What do you make of this?
Well, I can't speak for any of the other elected officials in the party. They'll all have to make their decisions. But I led successfully in Minnesota for 14 years with a big tent philosophy that there's many different ways and stripes of being a Democrat. We have conservative Democrats, we have centrists, we have progressives, and we have this new left. And I believe you win through addition, not subtraction. You win by growing your coalition, growing your party, not shrinking it. And as a result, that means that, you know, there's new voices, new faces, different ideas, and different perspectives, and that's never a bad thing for the Democratic Party. And look, I also believe passionately that the party chair at any level should not be putting their thumb on the scale. Our job is to respect the will of the Democratic primary electorate. And in this case, they sent a very clear message earlier this summer in New York City that Zohran Mamdani was their candidate. And my job is to support those primary voters, that he is the nominee of our party. I was proud to endorse him the day of, and we have continued to support him in his campaign. Look, we are a big tent party, as I said, and as long as I'm the chair of the DNC, we will continue to bring people in, because it's a very simple premise. You need different types of candidates in different spaces and places throughout this country to win. Yeah. And that's how you actually grow your party and actually build durable majorities.
Well, that's a fascinating answer, Mr. Chairman. You refer to the new left. Does the new left associate itself with socialism?
I think some probably do, Democratic Socialists, but I think this emerging left for sure represents a lot of different viewpoints. But as I mentioned, we have conservative Democrats, centrists, progressives, and this new left. And, in different parts of the country, you need a different type of candidate that represents those values. Most importantly, I've said this in my home state of Minnesota. It's really important to realize that, you can't run the same type of candidate everywhere and expect to win. Again, there's many different stripes and ways to be a Democrat, and we celebrate that here.
Well, it's really something. It's a kind of a bizarre moment when you look at the cross currents and the rhetoric here, specifically in New York City in this race, where you have the Republican president of the United States and his lieutenants endorsing the former Democratic governor of New York, and of course, a family that's been long associated with the Democratic Party in the Cuomos. Do you worry about confusion in the electorate?
I don't at all. I mean, first off, most New Yorkers don't care about what Donald Trump says. In fact, that is probably the kiss of death for any candidate who would receive his endorsement, particularly for New York City. But let me just say this. At the end of the day, we are focused on winning throughout this country, up and down the ballot. And that means finding candidates who fit their cities, fit their states, fit their districts. And that's what we're going to continue to do. We're focused on making sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. And again, we win by growing our coalition, not shrinking it.
When you consider mistakes of the past, and it's not for me to say what was a mistake, there was a project underway for a postmortem on 2024. When you were elected, you said, in fact, that would be one of your key missions, is to dig into what took place in the election and the failures that Democrats experienced here. There's word that report may be finished, Mr. Chairman. Do you plan to release that?
We do plan to release that, and within a matter of weeks. It's not completely finished yet. There's still a few key interviews we need to do. But look, the reality is when we started this process right after I was elected, I decided we weren't going to just look at the party or the candidate campaign. Think about this. There was $10 billion spent on the Democratic side of the equation here in 2024 alone. A record amount of money spent. Only $2.5 billion of that 10 was spent by the candidate campaign and the DNC and the party. As a result, 75% of the total activity, the total effort was spent by outside groups and other organizations, meaning that if we really want to get to some of the challenges and problems that occurred last year, we have to actually look at the whole thing, the whole ecosystem, and where we had failures. And that's why it's taken a little bit longer. But it is a very exhaustive report. We're just putting the final touches on it, having those last few interviews. We've already done over 300 interviews. And I think it will actually paint a picture that helps inform the future. And that's the most important thing for me, is learning the right lessons to help inform future elections so we can win again.
Well, I appreciate that, and we'd love to talk to you once that report is out. That's going to be a big deal once you make that public. I'll ask you lastly, based on something that you said, there are different candidates for different places and different scenarios, all within the Democratic Party. When we see the differences, for instance, just between New York and Virginia in this case, is it possible then to have a unifying message as you go into these elections and the midterms, if it's anything other than the anti-Trump message?
Yeah, and let me just say that we're going to win big tonight, but not on an anti-Trump message. What is the through line that actually connects a Zoran Mamdani to an Abigail Spanberger to a Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey? It's the fact that all three of them are focused on affordability. They're focused on an agenda to help people afford their lives, to bring down costs, to actually give people hope that their better days are ahead of them and they can achieve economic success with Democrats in control. And while they all have different challenges in each of their respective states, or in Zoran's case, the city, they all are reflecting the anxieties of their electorate, which are most people in this country are feeling the economic squeeze. They feel like they're getting priced out of a future. They can't afford their rents. They're worried about health care. They're worried about putting groceries on the table. They're worried about paying their gas and utility bills. It's become much harder under this administration. And as a result, that's where the Democratic Party is focused. Look, our message is very clear. No matter where you're from, no matter where you live in this country, no matter who you love or who you are, you deserve an opportunity to get ahead, not just get by, but truly get ahead, to climb the economic ladder, to build a better life for your family. That's what the Democratic Party is focused on. And whether you're Zoran Mamdani in New York City, or Abigail Spanberger in Richmond, Virginia, or Mikey Sherrill in Trenton, New Jersey, all three of them are going to do that when they win on Tuesday, this evening.
That was Ken Martin, chair of the Democratic National Committee, speaking with us a short time ago on Bloomberg on this election day. In Virginia, polls will close in roughly an hour, 20 minutes. Democrats leading in the polls in the governor's race there, as we show you a live shot of Abigail Spanberger's event, where she is expected to speak shortly after results come in, the Democratic nominee, while voters in New York City have a little over 2 hours of voting left. There's a live shot of voters in Brooklyn tonight that we've got our eyes on, and we'll continue to follow those big races and that redistricting measure on the ballot in California. We're just getting started. It's all ahead on this extended edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
This is the difference. This is the difference between what's happening in Texas and what's happening here in California. You didn't receive a phone call from the President of the United States to then quietly go in the back room and start drawing maps and legislatively try to jam them through. We're putting the maps on the ballot, and we're giving the power to the people. This will be the first redistricting that's ever done. That's the difference.
Thanks for being with us on a special extended edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew. That, of course, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, back in August there discussing his state's plan for redistricting and putting the measure to a vote on the ballot. Now, here we are 3 months later, and we turn to San Francisco, where Bloomberg's Eliyahu Kamisher is covering California's redistricting measure. Eliyahu, it's great to see you. Democrats say they've got this in the bag.
Yeah, well, it's hours till polls are closing, and it does seem like the wind is at their back. Polls have Proposition 50, polling in the high 50% to 60% approval rating. Governor Gavin Newsom has vastly outspent his Republican opponents. And so all indications are that he's cruising to victory, but, that doesn't leave an upset. There could always possible that something else could happen.
Do you give us a sense of how late a night this could be, or early morning tomorrow, Eliyahu? When do we find out?
The polls close at 8 p.m. Pacific time, and there's some analysts that are looking at this and saying we could have a decision within, an hour if it really does go the governor's way. But things can play out longer. Sometimes there's a lot of mail-in ballots that need to be counted. It just really depends on what the turnout looks like. But right now, early ballot returns do indicate that Democrats are ahead.
Bloomberg's Eliyahu Kamisher in San Francisco. We thank you so much. We'll check back in with you a bit later this evening as we reassemble our political panel. Bloomberg politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano are with us now. Jeannie, it has been said that if Gavin Newsom closes the deal on this, he's the presidential nominee 3 years from now. Do you agree?
I think he is a contender, a highly rated contender. I think he has taken something that many Democrats were fearing, looking at what was happening in Texas, and he has turned it around, and he has done so in a way that when you look at the polls, and as you were just talking about the support for this, it is much, much higher. I was skeptical when I heard that they were going to try to do this, but I think the way he has maneuvered this, it has been done in a way that suggests to Democrats they're not doing away with the independent commission, but they are not going to take what is happening in Texas under the thumb of Donald Trump lying down. And that, I think, does really help Gavin Newsom. But again, the Democrats, as I'm sure Rick will agree, have a big bench for 28. So he's one of a number of contenders.
Well, you know, Frank Luntz was with us last evening, as I'm sure you both remember, and said this Prop 50 election is the most important election that we're talking about across the country this evening. Rick, it could will reshape not only congressional districts in California, but has prompted other states to follow. How do you bring this to an end at some point? Yeah, look, there's obviously a big war going on to redistrict. Republicans started it in Texas. Democrats, continued on with this Prop 50 in California. And I think Frank's right. If this is successful, I think you'll probably see the new governor of Virginia, if it's Spanberger, do it in Virginia. They're talking about doing it in Maryland now, Illinois. There will be a lot of red states doing it based on what Donald Trump told them to do, but there are going to be almost an equal number that rally on the blue side. And so all of this is going to get wrapped up in a big ball and maybe net one or two Republican, which is not enough to hold this year's or next year's midterm. So even though it seems like it's very exciting and quite different than anything we're used to, I think by the time we get started the 26 midterms, nobody's even going to care about it. Fascinating. This, of course, started in Texas. Jeannie, will Republicans regret that?
I hope they do. I am not a fan of this. The losers here are the American public. We should not be engaged in constant mid-decade redistricting to gerrymander these seats. But when one party starts it, it is a domino effect. And so I think they may regret it. The other thing about it is campaigns are about candidates, issues, what's happening on the ground. They are taking a big chance, assuming that because the map is drawn a certain way, that is guaranteed a pickup for either side. Plus, they are drawing out some of their own, congressmen and women. So it's an iffy proposition to begin with, and I think it just speaks to how concerned Donald Trump is about what's going to happen next year, this time, when we have a midterm election, which, depending on what happens tonight, may be a very, very difficult position for him and the Republicans to be in.
I'm just curious, Rick, what do campaign managers and strategists do when the map is changing under your feet? At what point can you anticipate what these districts are going to look like in all these states and start investing in them?
Well, you have the data on the whole state, right? And so wherever the line is drawn, you know the voters and what their propensities are in the new parts of the state, new parts of the district. And so it's not a shock to the system, and a lot of the media bleeds over. I mean, there's no media market that knows which is a legislative line and which isn't. So it does have an impact on turnout. I mean, like being able to sort of get to know those voters, especially if they're coming in from the district that they hadn't voted in before, or for the candidate they hadn't voted in before, does become a hurdle. But like by the time you're there, you've learned everything about them that you need to know. So yes, it's a nuisance. We like to do this stuff years in advance and compile information on those voters. But if you got to do it on the run, technology is so good today, you can catch up.
Well, you're going to have Republicans like Darrell Issa and Ken Calvert now running against each other if this works, right?
Yeah, and you're going to have Democratic districts that are even bluer than they once were, so they won't have to run as hard as they are. And you're going to have some Republicans like the Darrell Issa district that's going to actually be more competitive. And so, you've got to be careful what you ask for on these. That's why you only monkey with this stuff once every 10 years.
And you were quick to remind us that it's not just gerrymandering, sometimes it's dummy mandering when it doesn't go the way that these state party leaders are hoping. Jeannie, are there tough lessons for some of these governors?
There actually may be. I mean, the idea is we sort of talk about it like they know exactly what they're doing. They're going to draw it this way, and the voters will just march in line. And that is not how elections work. There are real candidates, real issues, real concerns on the ground. And all of those things have to line up for somebody to win. So I think they have to be very careful about what they think that they are doing. And, as much as we have all this data and all all these numbers. Elections are in real time, and they're going to respond to not just the district in the state, but what's going on nationwide and in the world as well. So all of that can make the turnout and what's happening in the election far different than we ever imagined it.
We've talked a lot about the Trump effect this evening and whether there is one or not. We've talked a lot about a couple of races, including New York, New Jersey, Prop 50 in California. Rick, let's get into Virginia for a moment. Teeming with federal workers who have been furloughed for 35 days now, not getting paid. To what extent does the shutdown impact results and decisions in the Old Dominion?
Yeah, Joe, hundreds of thousands of federal workers were either let go during the Doge era or took retirement or now are furloughed. And that is a major impact, especially in Northern Virginia, a vote-rich area for the state that was going to have an impact on the outcome of today's election. Fairfax County alone, which makes up the majority portion of Northern Virginia, has seen voting turnout at the par of a presidential election. This is an off year. It's not even a midterm.
Yeah.
This is an off-year election, which usually has the lowest turnout in those cycles, and yet it's looking like a presidential election year. That's bad news for Donald Trump. That's bad news for the Republicans on those statewide tickets, and it's really, I think, portends the future in the midterm elections. When you have this much intensity on one side of the ballot, you're looking at a big change election.
Can we draw national trends out of what's happening in Virginia, Jeannie? Because a lot of Republicans would tell you we've got a candidate quality problem here, and you can't really duplicate this scenario anywhere else. But this could be a big night, obviously, for Abigail Spanberger.
It absolutely could. There is a candidate quality problem, as you call it, and I think we have to keep cognizant of that. But I do think that, we have a tendency to overread these off years.
We do.
But it is the first time we really get to take a temperature of the voters. I mean, all year we've sat around and talked about what's happening. Now the voters, at least in certain states, are going to weigh in. And if they come out in the numbers that Rick is talking about, and if Spanberger wins big, it does portend some type of frustration with what has happened over the last 9 or 10 months. But in addition, you got to keep in mind candidate quality, all those kinds of things. So there are other elements to that.
All right. We're going to stick with our panel, of course, for the evening, but I do want to mention some breaking news. President Trump just taking to social media to nominate Jared Isaacman as administrator of NASA. This just hit Truth Social. Back with us for some details here. Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall reporting live from the White House. Tyler, this is someone who was already at one point nominated for the job, right? Removed from the list, knowing that he was very close to Elon Musk. What's going on now? Sean Duffy, I guess, is about to lose a business card.
Right, exactly, Joe. This is a reversal. After 5 months ago, the White House pulled Jared Isaacman's nomination to lead NASA. Of course, he is a close ally of Elon Musk. Originally, we saw that nomination pulled during that spat between President Trump and Musk. But in recent weeks, Elon Musk has been really ramping up his criticism of Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, who, as you're alluding to, currently holds that spot. Now, Bloomberg News is reporting that Isaacman did meet with President Trump and Sean Duffy in recent weeks and appeared to seal the deal by contributing at least $1 million to pro-Trump organizations after President Trump, Joe, had criticized him for contributing to Democrats.
Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall, thank you. We'll check back with Tyler in our second hour of coverage here as she remains stationed at the White House. I'd love to hear from both of you. We only have about a minute left on this. Rick, what do you make of the turn? Elon's back in the fold?
Well, I wouldn't say Elon's back in the fold, but that $1 million check is a pretty convincing thing. Look, I mean, this administration plays like dominoes with personnel, and so it's really hard to tell any given day who's the last one to leave the Oval Office and make a decision like that.
Fascinating. Can he be confirmed, Jeannie?
I think it's going to be a little bit of an uphill battle, but I think it just speaks volumes about what moves Donald Trump, and that is donations, that is money. And of course, I don't know that it bodes so well for a rising Republican in Sean Duffy.
Fascinating. We'll have much more with Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano with us next hour. Coming up, our first poll closings of the night. Just about an hour from now, we're going to bring you live to all the key races from New York to New Jersey, Virginia, and California. It's a special extended edition of Balance of Power on election night on Bloomberg TV and radio. From Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York, I'm Joe Matthew. This is a special edition of Balance of Power Election Day 2025. We have a busy hour ahead. Asian trading markets just opening now, while in Virginia, the final hour of voting is underway as we speak. Virginia, the first of several key elections tonight that could have a national impact and deliver an early report card on President Trump's second term. The stakes could not be higher as Americans face a cooling economy, higher inflation, a government shutdown now on the verge of becoming the longest in history. One of the closest contests that we're watching, the governor's race in New Jersey, where Democrat Mikey Sherrill is taking on Republican Jack Ciattarelli, a state where President Trump made surprising gains a year ago. We'll take you live to the Garden State, where the economy and energy prices are front and center on voters' minds. And here in New York City, where voters will decide a Democratic socialist will run the capital of capitalism, Democratic nominee Zoran Mamdani has led the pack since earning the party's nomination in June. The question might not be if Mamdani wins, but how much he wins by. Tonight, we have analysis and live team coverage across all the major races. And kick off this hour's coverage with Bloomberg's Norah Mulinda, with me at world headquarters, Romaine Bostick in New Jersey, and Myles Miller here in New York. Norah joins us now with a look at how the Asian markets are looking as we get things started on the session after a risk-off mood in the U.S. trading session. Norah, how's it starting?
Well, Joe, clearly we are looking on a global scale, still seeing this risk-off sentiment really just ricocheting from the U.S. markets globally here. If you take a look at the Nikkei futures here, we are seeing them down just a touch, down about 0.6% here. You are seeing a lot of focus right now on big tech. Of course, TSMC in focus, also Samsung, really some of the key stocks that we are looking at here in the Asian session. But if we take a look back here on the U.S., of course, we are seeing S&P 500 futures still pointing lower here. Of course, as an extension of the decline that we did see at the closing bell today. So we are seeing this sentiment still continuing into the after hours trade. Of course, a lot of the focus right now on the Fed's path forward, potential AI bubble here, and a lot of uncertainty, of course, as we still continue sitting here in this government shutdown here, Joe.
Bloomberg's Norah Mulinda, we thank you, and we'll check back in with you a little bit later on this evening. Back with me now, Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick, who is live on the ground in Jersey City, covering the New Jersey governor's race. You know the narrative going into this evening, Romaine, that it's too close to call. What are you seeing on the ground?
And it looks like it is going to be a photo finish here in the gubernatorial race in the state of New Jersey. Remember, it was just 4 years ago, Joe, when Republican Jack Ciattarelli came within just about 3 percentage points from actually defeating the incumbent at the time, Phil Murphy. Phil Murphy now ending his second term, and Jack Ciattarelli has an even greater chance now of actually grasping the ring here in this election, something that didn't look possible just a few weeks ago when he was trailing his Democratic opponent, Mikey Sherrill, by almost 2 percentage points heading into this election. That lead is now narrowed down to about 1 to 2 percentage points, depending on what poll you want to believe. And President Trump has been a big factor in that. Remember, this is the third go-round for Ciattarelli. The first year that he ran, he actually had no kind words for Trump, calling him a charlatan. When he ran again in 2021, he basically didn't mention Trump at all, just kind of kept him at arm's length. But this time around, it is pretty much a full-on embrace, and that actually won him Trump's endorsement. That has carried him with Republican voters, and surprisingly, Joe, is actually started to carry him with independents and quite a few Democrats who flipped in the most recent presidential election to support the president and to support some of his policies.
Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick joining us live from New Jersey. We'll be back with Romaine later this evening with all eyes on New York, of course, as the city is set to elect a new mayor this evening. Here's a taste of what two of the leading candidates had to say ahead of Election Day.
We need a mayor who can stand up to Donald Trump, who can get the funding that New York deserves.
The MAGA movement's embrace of Andrew Cuomo is reflective of Donald Trump's understanding that this would be the best mayor for him.
Back with us now, Bloomberg's Myles Miller covering the New York City mayoral race this evening. He joins us live from a polling station where they are still lined up and voting. Myles, tell us what you're hearing and seeing from voters, knowing that Donald Trump and some pretty high-level Republicans, going from Elon Musk to Stephen Miller, all decided to endorse Andrew Cuomo last evening.
It's up to you if you want it. Yeah, here at Brooklyn Borough Hall, you have a highly engaged electorate. This is one of the polling districts that came out in record numbers for early voting. And so you see people coming in here this evening, and they're doing the voting late into the evening. We have polls open till 9 o'clock here in New York, and this is a race that is set up between three people from very different backgrounds. You've got Zohran Mamdani, the upstart, 34 years old, assemblyman who is focused on affordability. Then you've got the comeback kid, I guess, Andrew Cuomo, former governor, who's focused on public safety and who is focused on raising the minimum wage to $20. And then you've got Curtis Sliwa, who's focused on public safety, which is what he spent most of his life focused on. But this race really is down to Cuomo versus Mamdani. And if this is a race really focused on whether you want to go towards what Cuomo has always been for, which is trying to have steady government and steady leadership, or Mamdani, who has a vision for a different future in this city. And we've been talking about this all day. It's about much more now than just what the poll numbers show, right? It's about a 10% difference. What it really will get down to is just how much either of these two win by. Will it be a landslide and a mandate, or will this be a squeaker for Cuomo? That's what we're trying to figure out. But voters in New York City very energized by this. We know because 1.4 million people voted today. Over 100,000, about 102,000 people voted in mail-in ballots. And then we saw the number, 735,000 people voting in early voting. This was an election that New Yorkers were very energized by. They wanted to vote on very important issues, whether it be affordability, whether it be ideological values, or whether it be just to figure out if there should be a change in the way that City Hall is run. We'll know before long who will be taking Gracie Mansion and taking over in City Hall. That's the latest here in Brooklyn. I'll send it back to you.
Myles, it's really remarkable. The early voting numbers that you've been reporting are staggering, and it's making us ask who's actually voting today. And you've been talking to a lot of the voters as you've made your way through Manhattan and specifically in Brooklyn this evening. Are you hearing them speak to the issues that the candidates have been trying to illuminate, specifically prices in New York?
Certainly. You see the people who come out here for affordability, right? You've got people who are wearing campaign stickers, and those stickers, you know, will look at what the candidates are talking about, whether it's a mother coming in who's focused on child care, or whether it's a Jewish New Yorker who feels like Andrew Cuomo has great relationships with Israel and has great relationships with Jewish leaders in the city and will keep them safe. That is what people are focused on here, and it's what you've been hearing quite a lot. There are so many eyes on this race because, you know, it's always been said it's the second most important political job, government job in the country, running this big city, the center of certainly Wall Street and capitalism, of course, but also a burgeoning tech sector, you know, with AI hubs and all of that kind of stuff. So really a focus on who will lead the city best and how they will be good stewards of the city's finances and also keeping people safe in the city. Big race here today.
Great, Myles. Thank you so much, as always, reporting live from Brooklyn, Myles Miller. Joining us now with more perspective as California votes today on a proposition to redistrict the state, to redraw congressional lines. Democratic Congressman John Garamendi of California, a member of the House Armed Services, as well Transportation Committees. Congressman, it's been some time. It's good to see you, and welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. Before I get to Prop 50, I have to ask you about what's happening against the backdrop of the shutdown and the massive delays, cancellations, and ground stops that we've seen at so many airports around the country. From your perch on the Transportation Committee, do you see this as the cost of a shutdown, or should we be actively paying air traffic controllers until this is over?
Well, we should actually be paying everybody that's involved with the federal government, whether they are air traffic controllers or the military or teachers in various schools. The reality is this shutdown was not necessary. This shutdown really began with the passage of the Big Ugly Bill, in which millionaires and billionaires and corporations got massive tax to be paid for by working Americans, working families. So cuts were made in the healthcare system, specifically in the Affordable Care Act insurance policies. And those policies, some 24 million people have already seen the sticker shock, and there's going to be more to come with Medicare. But right now, all we need is one paragraph in the continuing resolution, and that paragraph simply says that the tax credits for the Affordable Care Act will continue for 2 years. Done. Let's open the government.
A simple paragraph. I don't know if you've suggested that to leadership, Congressman, but everyone seems to think when we get through the elections tonight, the markets or the government's going to reopen. We've heard this from leadership on Capitol Hill, from any number of lawmakers who have joined us here. Is this election somehow an inflection point in the shutdown standoff?
Yes, the elections are very, very important, no doubt about it. You had a lengthy piece on Mamdani, and he's certainly a change candidate. But similarly, if you go down to Virginia and to New Jersey, you have two centrist Republican women in the center, centrist. They're not on the outlying edges. The Democratic Party is a very, very big party. We've got very conservative folks, and we have obviously people like Mamdani who are on the left side of this. And we will eventually work together to get the election done. But right now, it's all about, for California, it's about Prop 50, which gives us an opportunity to level the playing field. Trump goes to Texas, demands a redistricting. He gets it, and he will probably get 5 new Republican seats. And we in California say that's neither fair nor is it good for this nation. And so now Prop 50 is a one-time redistricting. The next decennial in 2030, we'll go back to a commission to do this work.
Fascinating. I expect it's going to pass, according to the polls, at least, Congressman. Some are wondering by how much this will pass, having seen a massive disparity in spending. Democrats threw about $100 million into ads, according to Ad Impact. Republicans, $38 million. How much of this is a story about money versus California?
This is about California. This is about the California voters. And I would opine that voters across America are really fed up with Trump and fed up that the Republicans in the House simply refuse to stand up and be counted. They're just rolling over right now. The Speaker's entering the second month of dissolving the Congress of the United States. He won't let us go back. There's absolutely no action in the Congress of the United States. Well, all of this is going on. We could be writing laws. We could be writing the law that I just suggested, adding one paragraph. But we do know that the absence of the Congress of the United States gives Trump a lot of running room because nobody is there to push back and to hold him to account. So there's many different factors at play here. But right now, Prop 50 is going to pass. California voters have had it with Trump. And I talked to a lot of Republicans around, and they said, this cannot continue. And they are correct. Other states, I think we're going to see a similar rejection of Trump and the Republicans who have shown no courage whatsoever to stand up to Trump, even though they know that the laws they wrote and the Constitution that all of us swear to uphold is being routinely ignored, broken, and overrun by Trump.
Congressman Garamendi, we're looking at live images from a polling site in Brooklyn right now as we balance coverage here in a number of races, including that for the mayor of New York. I'm sure you're very familiar with Zohran Mamdani and the phenomena that he started here in Manhattan. There are a lot of questions, though, from mainstream Democrats about whether this is the new direction for your party, a democratic socialist. What do you say?
This is not a new direction for the Democratic Party. This is a new direction for the city of New York. Will it resonate across the nation? Yes, a little bit here and there. But basically just south, well, across the river, there's a different campaign underway, a different campaign for governor. And Mikey Sherrill is a centrist Democrat. So how do you balance that off against New York? Yeah. Well, there's balance right there. Go further south, go to Virginia. Once again, Spanberger is a centrist Democrat. Do those count for the future of the Democratic Party? I would opine absolutely yes. The Democratic Party is not the same policies that Mamdani has put forward. We're not that way. Bernie Sanders did not win the primary elections in 20 or 24, even though he didn't enter. But Mamdani is following along with some of the same rhetoric and some of the same policies. And the Democratic Party across the nation rejected that, went to a centrist candidate, Biden and Harris. And so here's where we are. Yes, New York is terribly important. It certainly is to the media. And it's important to all of the issues that you've already raised, Wall Street and the like. But the fact of the matter is there's a whole lot more America out there.
There sure is, of course. I mean, let's be honest. New York is literally an island, and maybe politics are on an island here as well. But we're looking at the potential for a big blowout for Zoran Mamdani, and it's too close to call, according to some polls now in New Jersey. Is there a lesson there for Democrats?
No. The lesson is that we're a big party. Mm-hmm. The lesson is that we would expect to see people on the left side of it. I mentioned Bernie Sanders, who, by the way, is not a registered Democrat, but nonetheless could and should be. Mamdani is following along with many of the same policies, and those issues are critically important that he has raised. Do you get there with a socialist, that is a program which the government owns more? And if you want a segue here, take a look at what Trump is doing to the American capital system. The U.S. government, Trump is forcing into American capitalism the big hand of the U.S. government. NVIDIA, you go down the list. Trump is demanding that the government own a major part of those massive corporations. What is that? If that's not a step towards socialism, then somebody get out the dictionary and tell me it's different. But at the White House, you're seeing the same thing. Is Mamdani asking for New York to own NVIDIA or to own Bloomberg? I don't think so.
I haven't heard that yet either, to be honest with you. But with all of that said, there are big questions about the Trump effect, Congressman. He says he will cut federal funding for New York City if Zoran Mamdani is elected. Will Congress have any say in that?
Not if we are in session, yes. But right now, the speaker is Trump's puppet. And the speaker has been told by the Trump, don't bring those people back. They're going to be a real pain. And we would be. And I am sick and tired of Trump being the big bully, bullying everybody, bullying the media. Too many media people rolled over to that bullying other, and now New York and California and everywhere else. That is not the way a president should be acting. I just think it's the playground bully has become the dictator. And he thinks he can do anything he wants to do. Shut off funding for this and that. He did and has been, together with the Secretary of Transportation, shut off the funding for the big tunnel and access by rail into New York. Yeah. New Yorkers ought to be outraged by this. And those of us in California, Trump tries to get us the same treatment. Hey, if you vote Democratic, you're going to get slapped down.
Well, I'll tell you, I wonder what the people of New Jersey think about that tunnel project as well. John Garamendi, it's great to see you, the Democratic congressman from California. We thank you, as always, for the insights. Coming up, we'll have a lot more of this special extended edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Stay with us. This is a special extended edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew in New York. Thanks for being with us as we keep our eyes on the mayoral election here in Manhattan and, of course, gubernatorial contests in both New Jersey and Virginia, the Prop 50 redistricting measure that's on the ballot in California. Let's start with what's happening in New York with big questions about the future of the Democratic Party. As a self-proclaimed Democratic socialist, stands to be the next mayor of New York. Bloomberg Opinion's Nia Malika Henderson and Bloomberg Opinion's Tim O'Brien are with us. It's great to see both of you, and thanks for being part of our coverage. Nia, what is your thought about what's about to happen in Manhattan? If the polls are anywhere near being correct, we'll be talking about Mayor Mamdani and the Democratic Party. Despite what we just heard from Congressman Garamendi of California, may have a reckoning at that moment. What's going to take place inside the party?
Yeah, listen, you're going to have a very young and largely inexperienced mayor running New York City. If the polls are to be believed going into this, Mamdani is going to win. He is going to be the face of the Democratic Party if Republicans get their way, right? You are going to have something of a split decision probably tonight if you look at the different governors' races. There's centrists who are running. Those folks look strong going into tonight. So it isn't actually that Mamdani will be the face of the Democratic Party. He will be a face, and I think it's up to Democrats to really present a big tent party, right? This is a wing of the party that has been ascendant. You think about Bernie Sanders' run against Hillary Clinton. You think about the rise of populism more generally, and Trump kind of speaks to that as well. And so, listen, this is going to be a new era for the party, and I think it's really going to depend on how well does he do. He's making a lot of promises about what he's going to be able to do as mayor. How successful will he be? I think if you look back over the last couple of mayors in New York City, the last really successful one, and I'm not just saying this because he signs my checks, but it was Michael Bloomberg, right? Bill de Blasio, not a very successful mayor. Obviously, Eric Adams was not either. And so we'll see how this young man handles this very, very big job.
I spoke with DNC Chair Ken Martin earlier today, Tim, and he referred to the new left. I haven't heard that term used, at least in this context. And you saw how uncomfortable John Garamendi was with the idea of Zoran Mamdani being the future of the party. How does this reconcile itself?
Well, I mean, I don't think that New York City is emblematic of all of the United States any more than anyone who runs it is as an individual, politician. It's a very specific city with a specific demographic and unusual sets of needs. It's a wealth generator, it's a cultural touchstone, and it's an authentically diverse city. So it has to elect mayors who are in touch with a range of issues most mayors aren't. Wherever Mamdani lands on solutions to some of the problems he's identified, he put his finger on things that Democrats nationally do need to be in touch with. Affordability. In the case here, he wants to freeze rents because there's a massive housing problem in New York that a mayor of any stripe would have had to take on. And that's in play in New Jersey in different ways. It's at play in Virginia in different ways. I think this issue of where does the party as a whole tack to take on Trump is this debate between a centrist party and a progressive party. Democrats have always tried to make that work together because by nature it's a diverse party. What they're going to have to look at are these districts that went for Trump that had been traditionally stronger Democratic strongholds in the past, and I think we should look for some of that in the results tonight, particularly in New Jersey. In locations like Paramus, where there's a big Latino population. But getting back to Mamdani, I think, as Nia pointed out, he has a massive managerial task in front of him that I don't think is about ideology per se. A lot of it is about getting the garbage picked up, getting the streets plowed, dealing with the city council. The New York City budget is bigger than most state budgets. It's around $112 billion. He's going to have a very large task in front of him, in addition to trying to offer free bus service, trying to offer city-owned grocery stores.
We'll see about all that.
And then the police department, which is a gargantuan thing to take on.
Nia, the president says he will cut federal funding to New York and cancel projects if there is what he refers to as a communist mayor. What else is he capable of? Are we going to see troops on the streets of New York, maybe in Times Square on Inauguration Day?
Listen, you've seen Trump do this in Democratic-run cities throughout the country, Chicago, Los Angeles. You've seen it out in Portland as well. And so, yes, I imagine this is a president who wants the fight. He wants to elevate Mamdani. You see Republicans want to do that as well. And this is, Trump is a New Yorker himself, right? And so I do think he is a president who likes to govern by force and strength, and he likes displays of his own power, and he likes the kind of pictures that can emerge from something like that. So I expect this to be a real locus of his attention, of the Republican Party's attention as well, because they are going to try to make the Democratic Party synonymous with what is going on in New York City with this young mayor who looks like he's going to be the next mayor of New York City.
Tim O'Brien, you wrote the book on Trump, which is why you know how to tangle with him in court. Is that what we have in the future here, Mamdani versus Trump in court for the next several years?
Well, Trump has threatened to withhold aid. I think he could probably withhold about $7 billion. That's spread across, I think, 20 different agencies or so. It touches things like SNAP, Medicare, it touches the public transit system, public universities. You can go on down the line. Some of it even goes to the police department. Two realities. New York can sue and block that action. I expect the city to do that. The other thing that folks should focus on is that New York City exports more money in federal tax payments annually than it gets back. Probably about $75 billion more annually. If there's a $7 billion short fund, maybe New York City just decides to withhold some of its federal tax payments in order to make up the balance. This could become a very ugly tete-a-tete.
So again, I'll see you in court, I guess, is the message.
I'll see you in court or I'll see you at the bank.
Yes, I'll see you at the bank. Wow.
Yeah.
Neo, Donald Trump's telling people to vote for Andrew Cuomo. Rick Davis told us earlier there's no MAGA in New York. Who's going to respond to that?
Yeah, we'll see. This is a sort of last-ditch effort by Donald Trump to rescue Andrew Cuomo's flailing candidacy. I mean, this is a real shocker that his political career will likely end tonight at the hands of this very young upstart of a candidate. He ran a not-so-great campaign prior to this and decided to come in, as an independent and run again, and has run a fairly lackluster campaign so far. And you had Donald Trump, I think, in the end, along with some other high-profile Republicans, saying, listen, don't vote for Curtis Sliwa. I mean, and part of this is also just about the moribund Republican Party in New York City, that the best they could put up was Curtis Sliwa. So you have Donald Trump in the end saying, never mind Curtis Sliwa, he has no chance of winning, and maybe Cuomo could do something that it doesn't look like he'll be able to do if you look at the polls going into this.
It can be tough to be a Republican in New York. But let's cross the river, where it's a very different story here. Republicans who are going to be voting, and independents for Jack Ciattarelli, still have to use that tunnel, right? They still have to make use of the infrastructure that Donald Trump is defunding in New York. They tell us that race is too close to call. Could New York impact results in New Jersey?
I don't think so. I think they're very different races, but I think you put your finger on a really important point, which is the greater New York metropolitan area is an amazing wealth generator.
Sure thing.
It generates wealth for Republicans, Democrats, middle-income folks, low-income folks, wealthy folks, and it has worked by and large for a very long time. Trump knows, because this is where he and his family made their fortune. And when you mess with things like funding for the tunnels, or policing, or education, bread and butter things that all New Yorkers rely on, you're messing with a pot of gold. I don't think if Mamdani comes in, you're going to see a mass exodus of billionaires to Florida. I don't think New York's a unique place. People like to be here.
Right.
I don't think they're going to go away for that. I think in New Jersey, that race is very interesting because Ciattarelli almost beat Phil Murphy in the previous gubernatorial race. Southern Jersey is very red. He has tried to, follow this line between embracing Donald Trump but not being full-bore MAGA, particularly around issues about immigration. But the reality is I think most New Jersey voters are focused on bread and butter economic issues that I don't think Mikey Sherrill has fully addressed as a candidate.
Interesting.
And if there's fault lines in this, it may be that she didn't define herself as someone other than Jack Ciattarelli, but also as someone who could handle economic issues facing the state of New Jersey.
It's a really interesting microcosm here in New Jersey. Nia, Donald Trump made huge strides in the state in his election, and many Republicans are looking to extend them or see if they can exploit the gains that have already been made. Some polls have this down to a one-point race. Is Mikey Sherrill doing better than the numbers show?
Listen, Democrats certainly hope so. I mean, they're looking for a clean sweep tonight. She has run as a centrist. She was part of the Mod Squad in Congress. She lacks what the kids like to call riz, right? She isn't somebody who really kind of breaks through, in terms of politics. Politics it's a visual medium, it's a television medium, and she isn't someone I think who breaks through as much as Democrats would hope. And of course, you've got Ciattarelli, someone who ran. And again, you think about the way that Donald Trump was able to win in 2024, making inroads with black voters, with Latino voters, with working class voters of those backgrounds. And we'll see, is Cheryl somebody who's able to sort of reverse those trends? Is she going to be able to get the numbers among Latinos, among black voters in that state? And also some of these suburban, upper educated voters as well. You saw some erosion among Democrats. Is Mickey Cheryl the kind of candidate who's able to sort of start to reassemble that Democratic coalition that was so important to people on the national stage and in some of these more moderate states? That was the coalition. So we'll see what Mickey Cheryl is able to do. And this sort of brand of centrism, right? We see that with Mickey Cheryl. We see that in Virginia as well. These are two candidates, at least in Spanberger. It looks like she'll win, partly because she doesn't have a very good opponent there. But is this where the Democratic Party really is? Do they want the kind of moderate establishment Democrats, or is somebody like Mamdani, somebody who can reassemble that coalition that's been so important to Democrats?
Really great conversation. Bloomberg Opinions, Nia Malika Henderson and Tim O'Brien. I'm really glad you could spend some time with us this evening. And we should note, Michael Bloomberg has endorsed Andrew Cuomo in the mayoral race and donated to a super PAC supporting Cuomo. Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Television and Radio. Earlier today, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked about President Trump's expectations for elections tonight. Here's what she said.
As you know from this podium, I'm quite limited in what I can say with regards to ongoing political elections. I think the president has spoken for himself and what he wants to see take place in these elections today.
Back with us for a closer look at the response from the administration this evening, Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall reporting from the White House North Lawn. Tyler?
Hey, Joe. Good evening. Well, President Trump has weighed in directly on all of these races, as tonight is seen as partly a reflection of his policies so far this term. In the gubernatorial races, we've seen President Trump post on Truth Social most recently in the last hour, urging voters in New Jersey to get out and vote before the polls close there at 8 p.m. Eastern. He's also held a series of tele-rallies leading up to tonight, but also, importantly, appears to be pulling money from his own personal war chest to invest in these campaigns. He reportedly has invested $1 million in each of the governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey, because he may not be on the ballot tonight, but we did see him make some sizable inroads with voters in both of those states in 2024, closing the gap despite losing the states by 5 and 10 percentage points respectively in Virginia and New Jersey. A hope for Republicans that they can bring more voters into the party in both of those states. But at the same time, as you've been discussing on the program, we're seeing the economy really come to light, and these Democratic candidates in both of these places tie Republican opponents to what appears to be sinking consumer sentiment when it comes to the economy, as it reached a 5-month low in October. Now, if we stick with the money, of course, important to mention that President Trump has really heightened the stakes when it comes to the New York City mayoral election, threatening to withhold federal funding from the city if Mamdani wins. He's already frozen about $18 million in federal funds amid the government shutdown, and New York City says that as part of their fiscal year 2026 budget, they are banking on $7.4 billion in federal grants from the administration. It's something we're going to have to watch closely, because both parties are going to comb through tonight's results to inform their midterm strategies. And Joe, of course, as you well know, this White House is watching very closely what's happening in California and how that redistricting effort could impact the shape of the House come next year.
Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall. We thank you, Tyler. Live from the White House. We'll be back with Tyler a bit later this evening. We're joined again by Bloomberg's Skylar Woodhouse, who's on the ground for us in Leesburg, Virginia, covering the governor's race. How's it going there, Skylar?
Hi, Joe. Yes, so we're here at the Winsome Earle-Sears campaign event. If we just look behind me, I know it doesn't look like there's a lot going on right now, but supporters are very slowly starting to trickle in, with polls in Virginia closing at 7 o'clock. Now, here in Virginia, regardless of who wins the governor's race, history will be made. Virginia is set to elect their first female governor. So regardless, whether it's Democrat, Republican, history will be made here in Virginia tonight. And for the Republican candidate, the current Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earle-Sears, she's really been aligning herself with the Trump administration despite not having received a formal endorsement from President Trump. But she has really been focusing on immigration and common sense issues that the Trump agenda has sort of really talked about since returning to the White House. And for the Democratic candidate, Abigail Spanberger, she has leaned into President Trump's impact on Virginia, talking about his sweeping job cuts and what that means for Virginians who a lot work York and Washington, D.C. And just one fun fact, as of yesterday, according to the AP, about 1.4 million folks had already voted, early voting in Virginia. And on both sides, they're really pushing turnout for this race. President Donald Trump last night in a tele-rally for Winsome Earle-Sears for the Republican ticket was really encouraging Republican voters, and Democrats as well are trying to secure as many votes as possible, because even though Spanberger has been the front runner, it still could come down to be a very close race.
Skylar Woodhouse with us live from Virginia. Thank you, Skylar. Interesting to see the president never mention the name of the Republican candidate in that town hall last evening. Back with us now for a deeper dive into both gubernatorial contests is Bloomberg Politics contributor Rick Davis, a Republican strategist and partner at Stone Court Capital. Rick, it's great to have you here as we start with the state of Virginia, I believe is the plan here. The geography in these races, incredibly important here. We want to get a better sense of where we should be looking as we go to ground. Here's the map of Virginia here, and you look at the blue blob there up in northern Virginia. You've been referring to Fairfax County, where the early voting totals have been remarkable.
Yeah, what the blue blob really represents is Fairfax County. And what that shows you is a Democratic stronghold. And what you really want to see is, are they voting at intense levels? Are they going to vote enough to really carry the day for the Democratic ticket? And so far, this is level to presidential level voting. In other words, the amount of people who early voted in Fairfax County is on par with a presidential election. And this is an off-year election. It's not a midterm, off-year election, which is usually the lowest voting turnout for any cohort in an election. And so this is pretty extraordinary. And at the same time, we're finding out that some of the early voting in the red counties, which are all these sort of suburban and rural counties, has been below the presidential average. So that's bad news for Republicans in the state of Virginia.
Well, really interesting. And we should note the map that we're looking at here represents results from the 2024 election, right? So what you see red is the area that Donald Trump won. Rick, when we consider the federal workers who live in Virginia, tens of thousands of them have been furloughed. And you look at some of the areas in which they live and work. To what extent could this shutdown impact results in the state?
Yeah, Joe, hundreds of thousands in Virginia have been either fired during the Doge campaigns or furloughed during the shutdown. And so it has a significant impact, not just on the number of voters who are probably discontented, from these government actions, but also their families and various relations and their neighbors. This creates an intensity, and we're seeing that intensity around the Washington, D.C. area, those collar counties like Fairfax and Falls Church. Falls Church today has voted 107% to where it was in the presidential election.
Unheard of on a night like this. To your point, it's not even a midterm. It's something even less than an off year. I want to turn to New Jersey here, and we're going to do the same thing with the map. Again, this is red and blue representing the results in 2024. This is a much closer gubernatorial contest, and we've been talking this out. Mikey Sherrill, of course, the Democrat leading in most of the polls, sometimes by as little as 1 point. Where in New Jersey, as we look at the map here, will this decision be made?
Well, as you can see, New Jersey is really two states, Republicans on the north and Republicans in the south, and a solid blue line through the middle. But the battleground is that corner of blue, and that would be Bergen County. And Bergen County is where Donald Trump made up so much room. In 2020, he had 16% of, his margins were 16% below, and he improved them by 10% in 2024, which made a lot of people feel like, oh, Republicans are starting to make inroads, especially in Bergen County. Citarelli in his last election only lost by 3%, by and large because of a big Republican turnout in Bergen County. So we're watching Bergen County today. How blue is it going to be? Unlikely it's going to turn red, but we want to see those margins low.
Bergen County, of course, and for the benefit of our radio listeners, this is when you start getting up to the New York area. So these are people who are being impacted as well by politics in New York City, in many cases work in New York City.
Well, and mostly you would think that would mean solid blue, right? Democrats all the way, because, the city of New York is such a Democratic cohort. But this is where Donald Trump made up some ground. He even made up some ground in New York City in the 2024 elections. And so people are really wondering, are we seeing a conversion, this, realignment of Republicans, especially with working class voters in this area that you just described? Are they going to start voting for not just Donald Trump, but other Republicans? This is a key test. Will Citarelli do something that other Republican down ticket candidates not been able to do, and that is get the votes that Trump gets.
Fascinating. We're going to find out together here with the help of Rick Davis, Bloomberg politics contributor, Republican strategist, and partner at Stone Court Capital. He'll be back with us with more later this hour. Coming up, the redistricting battle we've been discussing has spread nationwide with President Trump's pressure on states like Texas to change their maps. Now today, California has a measure on the ballot to change its own. We'll bring you details next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is a special extended edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew. Happy Election Day as voters across the U.S. from New York City to New Jersey and Virginia cast ballots. Election officials operating with sharply reduced support from a federal government agency that helped previously, when it comes to states and localities, counter bomb threats and cyber attacks around polling places. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency has abandoned its Election Day Situation Room, which had shared vital intelligence on physical and cyber threats with state and local authorities. For the details, we bring in Bloomberg's Michael Shepard, who joins us live from our Washington bureau. This is part of life in a shutdown, Michael?
It's part of life in a shutdown, Joe, but this is also more reflective of what we're seeing with elections here in this country. Over the past dozen years, the question of security has loomed large over the balloting process here. And this election is the first since Donald Trump has returned to power. And it really is a test of how his administration will administer oversight of the balloting process, including the question of security, which has become so critical. In 2024, we saw more than 227 bomb threats against polling places and election offices during the presidential races. And this year, today in New Jersey, we saw 7 polling places that were targeted with bomb threats that proved not to be credible. But for these local authorities, it is critical to have that federal support to coordinate communication and response should it become necessary. And it's also important to note, Joe, that there is a backdrop. And that, of course, is that the president and his allies have repeatedly questioned the balloting process and questioned and really sought in some ways to undermine its integrity. So we're seeing this push and pull, not only when it comes to security, but pulling away from security in a process, in an area that they have openly questioned.
Many thanks to Bloomberg's Michael Shepard, staying up late with us and helping to drive our coverage in Washington. Shep, thank you. Another major issue in focus this election day, the redistricting battle and how states are planning to redraw maps in order to shift the number of seats in the U.S. House. Here's California Governor Gavin Newsom, President Trump, and Texas Governor Greg Abbott discussing their plans.
This is the difference. This is the difference between what's happening in Texas and what's happening here in California. We didn't receive a phone call from the President of the United States to then quietly go in the back room and start drawing maps and legislatively try to jam them through. We're putting the maps on the ballot and we're giving the power to the people.
They redistricted. And they've done it all over the place. And they've done it in California, by the way. Before this, they've done it in California. So we'll see what happens. We have a wonderful governor in Texas. He feels strongly about it. It's going to be up to him.
I'm about to sign the law that creates the one big, beautiful map that ensures fair representation in the United States Congress for Texans. Texas is now more red in the United States Congress.
Joining us now for more analysis on the redistricting battle, live here at our world headquarters in New York, Bloomberg's Texas Bureau Chief, Julie Fine. It's great to see you, Julie. Happy Election Day. You've been covering this for months now because it didn't start in California. It started in Texas. Are Republicans glad that they got the genie out of the bottle?
I think Republicans in Texas, no matter what's happening in California, are happy that they were able to do this. I mean, their hope is that they can pick up 5 seats in the state of Texas. The question is, however, they basically did this based on how these districts voted in terms of president. So they'll have to see if this stays the same in terms of Congress. Some people might like the person that's serving them now. So they're kind of working through all those details now. In terms of buyer's remorse, there simply is not that in Texas. And if you take a look at the map and you understand this, there's more red than blue when it comes to state legislatures. So if this becomes a big battle here, Republicans likely have the advantage.
They're looking to gain about 5 seats here, apparently. Would this have happened without Donald Trump?
I don't know. I mean, they've been talking about redistricting for some time in Texas, but it's certainly got to be a much more passionate issue when the president said that he wanted to do it. I mean, there was even discussions that, hey, the president wants to do this, so let's go ahead and do this. When you look, too, at redistricting, it doesn't necessarily always make it so safe for certain members of Congress, and there were definitely some quiet whispers about it, but at the end of the day, the Republicans came together and said, we are going to go ahead and do this. They are likely to pick up some seats. 5 may be a bit aggressive, but we will find out. And even again, like you just said, if it's set off by California, there are other states in the mix as well now.
There are a lot of others as we make our way through this year. Back with us now, we bring in our political panel. They have thoughts on this. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis, Republican strategist, partner Stonecourt Capital, and our Democratic analyst, Jeannie Shenzano, Democracy Visiting Fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Jeannie, we've talked about this earlier. The efforts by Gavin Newsom and other Democrats will be enough to blunt the impact of Republican redistricting or not?
Yeah, I think so. They are matching, as Julie was just talking about. You've got the 5 maybe in Texas, and now you're going to match that likely. We'll know tonight with Prop 50 in California. And this just becomes a sort of escalation fight. And that's why it doesn't make much sense. I mean, you think about the time, the resources, the energy committed to this. And is it really going to make a difference? Likely not. And so I think maybe in best case scenario, they rethink doing this again as we go forward.
How about other states that are still considering this, Rick? The president and the administration have been putting pressure on any number of states from Indiana. Obviously, Texas is where this started. Missouri is getting phone calls. Where does it ever end?
Yeah, this fight that Jeannie talks about isn't a fair fight. Most of the Democratic states that they want to change have, constitutional provisions that say commissions have to do that, good government reforms that went on throughout the aughts. But now, in Republican states, it's basically we don't want to buy into any of that stuff. It's our legislature, like Texas. And so it's just easier for Republicans to do it. And so you're right. In a state like Indiana, there's been a lot of effort, especially by the vice president, a couple trips there to try and convince the governor, who is resistant to this idea of putting this in play. And there are some questions as to whether or not he's got the votes in the legislature. So unlike Texas, there are some places that just don't want to see their lines monkeyed with. But look, it may turn out that advantage Republicans because we can just put more states in play. Democrats will follow in with Virginia and Illinois and Maryland, and Republicans will do Florida and North Carolina. I mean, it has really set off a range war for redistricting.
Aren't you glad this all started in Texas?
Yes, yes. Trendsetter right here.
Well, we knew that already. Julie, thank you so much. We're showing a live view of what would be at least the headquarters, if not the victory or concession address from Winsome Earle-Sears, the Republican in Virginia, whose name was not mentioned by President Trump last evening in the Tella Hall. Abigail Spanberger, the Democratic nominee, is, regarding the polls at least, is set to win this contest. But I'd love both of your takes on this because we're only moments away from polls closing. Rick, we already went over the map in Virginia. Do you believe the polls that show Abigail Spanberger with a layup?
Yeah, she's never trailed since the beginning of this campaign. She's a good candidate. She's run a good campaign. And Winsome Earle-Sears, candidates matter and campaigns matter. And she's getting rated a C by most professionals in Virginia for that effort. I really look at this attorney general's race. I think the governor's race is baked, but the attorney general's race between the Democrat and Republican has been the closest in the state, with the Democrat having suffered an enormous controversy related to some conversations he had on Twitter, that would be called political,
threatening political
threats. And so the question is, can Democrats dominate the state enough to even pull him in after those extraordinary comments?
I was mentioning, Jeannie, you drive around my neighborhood in Northern Virginia and you see a lot of Spanberger signs with Jay Jones's name right on it. You get the whole Democratic ticket on the lawn sign. Could we be in a world where there's a split ticket here? And to Rick's point, if all the Democrats win in Virginia, what does that say about Spanberger?
You know, I think we could see a split ticket. I don't know if we will, of course, but, you know, I think when you pull out, you're looking at Spanberger. She has really run on what has been the key issue in all of these races, which has been affordability, cost of living. Of course, she's in Virginia with all these public employees. They are in the midst of a government shutdown. We're talking about redistricting, and ironically, what that would mean is that we would have less compromise in a Congress that is not even operating right now. So you couple all this together, and in a state like Virginia, I would not be surprised if we get a complete domination by Democrats. Just because of the amount of frustration there is towards Washington, D.C., which, of course, another irony is what Donald Trump ran against in 2024. And 9 to 10 months into this, people are throwing up their hands and completely frustrated by what they're seeing out there already. And his main issue, the economy, many people are not happy.
So is this actually a referendum, then, on how Donald Trump has handled the economy, Rick? It's the same issue as we've suggested many times this evening. Prices, whether it's Virginia, New Jersey, or New York. And voters are coming up with different solutions in all three places.
That's right. And I do think it's about that issue because in Virginia, obviously, that's what Spanberger's been running about. But like in New Jersey, Mickey Sherrill has had to run away from a very unpopular governor who's seen as a failure in trying to contain the increase in prices to the consumers in New Jersey. So everyone's got their little twist to it. But I do think, too, what we're seeing play out here is rampant, I would say, divisions among the parties. Yeah. As Jeannie points out, there's no effort to try and find common ground in this election. If anything, Republicans are voting Republicans, Democrats are voting Democrat, and they are fighting over a core in the center who really has been disaffected in the political process.
Will there be a Democratic reckoning if all Democrats win this evening and try to figure out which has the playbook for the midterms?
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be a reckoning for the Democrats.
Yeah.
You look at their popularity, Joe, it is horrendous, way underwater. So when people are voting Democratic and it's not much better, slightly better for Republicans, they are really holding their nose, which to me means it is a pox on all of their houses. People are angry, they're frustrated. So that's why it's better to be the change candidate than the candidate of continuity in a race like this.
Wow, but couldn't put it better than Rick Davis or Jeannie Shanzano. Thank you both for the insights, our Bloomberg Politics contributors, and thank you for being with us on an extended edition of Balance of Power, election results coverage all night long on Bloomberg TV and radio.